everybody, hope you're doing well out there. My name's Ben and welcome to Aquarium Zen in Seattle. Today we're sitting here with our ADA 120p 65-gallon aquarium. This is one of our main displays in our showroom here, and it definitely grabs a lot of attention and generates a lot of conversation within the store. So we thought we'd do kind of a retrospective deep dive on this one. It's about a year old and kind of reaching that point of maturity where it's getting really dense and really lush and kind of really sort of settling into its own identity. And so yeah, just wanted to give some background on it, explain how it came to be how it is, how it started out, and what the steps along the way were, sort of what the learning process has been like along the way. So this tank I have been really, I feel like, privileged to work with. It's pretty cool to be able to just jump into scaping a frameless 120p 4-foot long tank. Like, that's an awesome experience on its own. But to do so in this sort of environment with the people we've had around, like working with Steve on this one, and then being able to share it with the whole Aquarium Zen community while it's gone through the process of maturing and coming into itself, that's really been a fun and rewarding process, and it's really felt like sort of a microcosm of what this hobby is and what it entails as we've been going through it. You know, there's been elements of collaboration, there's been a lot of patience required, and a lot of pivoting, a lot of adapting. I feel like those are all really big themes that are really prevalent in the aquascaping and fish keeping hobby in general. They were definitely prevalent in this scape as well. You see, you know, something like this with all these bright colors and lush plants and, you know, all the fish out and about and stuff like that. And it looks like it was all like perfectly planned and just came together just right. But this definitely is a lot different than what I thought it would look like in the beginning. And it definitely had some struggles and some difficulties that we had to overcome while we were working on it. And so that's just to say that, you know, for every time you see something beautiful in here, there's often times where we're still trying to perfect it, trying to get the little details down to where it's highly functional and truly an effective ecosystem. The way this tank started out, we used a bunch of ADA Amazonia aqua soil like we normally do in most of our setups around here. Originally, this tank was just a rock scape. It was just all blue fin stones. I had them set up in a display that sort of sprawled over like 2/3 of the tank. This was sort of like a large-scale Iwagumi scape before this iteration of it, and so I was kind of doing another iteration of that same style because I didn't want to like make too much of a splash. Once I got the rocks all laid out in there, I was talking about it with Steve, and we were standing here looking at it, and he grabs this one big piece of hornwood, and he's like, what if we put this one like right over here? And then like next thing I know, I'm digging through the closet, opening up bags of hornwood, like picking out cool pieces, and we're like putting these pieces of wood together and like all different places, all nestled in throughout the rocks and stuff. And it really started looking a lot more like my style of tank. You know, like I seldom do scapes that are exclusively wood or exclusively rock. I almost always use elements of both, and hornwood especially is like my favorite material to work with, just like the texture and the chunkiness that it brings. So yeah, it was really fun seeing Steve get excited about that, and being able to share that kind of experience with someone. There's not all that many aquarium nerds out there that you can like have that sort of collaborative experience with. Then it was also just like fun creating a new dynamic within the tank, making it different from the last iteration. So the build on this one, I'll be honest, it was fun, but it was also pretty nerve-wracking. It was different than I feel like a lot of the builds that I do, whether like in my home or the smaller scale ones that we do in the shop here. This one really felt like a bit of an audition almost. This was, you know, my first shot at working with a really large and important display within the store. This was a tank that we were putting together just like a couple weeks before Steve took off and moved to Hawaii. So it was really a test of like, can I effectively put this sort of highly visually interesting tank together and have it run in the long term? And can I maintain it effectively? Can I make the right decisions to be able to keep it healthy? And is what I think is visually interesting really going to appeal to the other people who are sharing this space with us? This one was a lot of fun in particular too, because I got to work with Steve before he left for Hawaii on this tank. And we collaborated together on hardscape and choosing the plants and doing the planting, all that kind of stuff. Really fun to share that experience. It definitely took the pressure off a little bit, being able to lean on someone as experienced as Steve and tap into his knowledge and expertise in this subject in general. Also just knowing that he also thought it was looking pretty cool and doing well. I mean, that kind of feedback from someone with as much aquascaping experience as Steve is always reassuring. So that was really helpful and kind of, you know, helping me gain my confidence in actually jumping into this tank, taking some risks, that sort of stuff. This one, it started out with a relatively small number of plants. You know, we did Rotala macrandra green in the front left corner. I was really excited to use just the regular old Rotala macrandra, the real bright pink broadleaf one behind it. That one didn't end up sticking, but yeah, that one was one I was really excited for. We also used the Lindernia rotundifolia, the variegated one, so it gets those cool like watermelon stripes on it. That was one that I really enjoy working with, so I was really excited to feature that one, especially because it gets little flowers and you can let it grow up above the water line and get those cool little, almost like forget-me-not sort of flowers. But yeah, and then we used some Ludwigia arcuata, some needle Ludwigia in the front right corner, and some Super Red Ludwigia. Super Red was actually just started from like 3 or 4 little trimmings of immersed growth from our emergent tank in the back. So that stuff has really taken off since then. And then just some mini dwarf hairgrass down in the front, maybe like 3-4 tissue cultures at the start. So it was pretty sparse at the beginning and definitely took its time to grow in. And then the pennywort was sort of a late addition, but it was one that I had like sort of been scheming on the whole time without really saying it. I just remember we had gotten pennywort in the shop at one point and a piece of it had floated to the top of the stock tank, and it just made this luscious, really dense, beautiful raft right at the top with these like nice emergent sort of like almost cupped leaves. It just really struck me and inspired me to want to use it somewhere, and this seemed like the perfect spot for it, given that this wood probably would have grown all sorts of algae if it was just sitting right under there, under the light. So yeah, really just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 or 7 plants at the start for a whole 120p. So this one started out with a pretty, again, a pretty simplistic cast of fish. We have the stars of the show are the 2 super red koi angels that live in here. You know, I talked about patience earlier, and the fish were really a huge part of that. It took a while to get to the point where I felt like the fish were really a dynamic element in this tank. The angels, when they went in, were, you know, they were like quarter sized in body size, so really small, and you brightly colored, but at that size, they just didn't catch quite that much attention. So I used the green neon tetras. That's my favorite variety of neon tetra. Just really, really like those ones, but they were also teeny, teeny tiny when we first put them in there. And so, you put like 50 in a tank and you're like, yeah, this is gonna fill it out, it's gonna be awesome. And then, they're scared, they're tiny, you hardly ever see them, and you're like, oh man, well, I guess I'll just have to wait until they grow a little more. And they definitely did. They look awesome now, but that was definitely a challenge to navigate. And then at the time, I think the only other species we put in here were like the classics, Amano shrimp and autosynclus, to keep things clean. We also, this is one that I feel like grabs a lot of attention for people who, hang out long enough to actually observe them come out and be out in the open. But the Lake Inley loaches, the little kind of orange speckled guys that are cruising around down at the bottom, I'm really a fan of those kind of hovering loaches, like rosy loaches, pygmy stripe loaches, that are sort of similar to these Lake Inley loaches. The Lake Inleys are a bit bigger, and honestly, I just felt kind of bad for them. Like, they had been at the shop for, probably like a year and a half, and they're beautiful fish, but no one seemed to really want to incorporate them into their tanks at home. They were just hanging out in one of our stock tanks, and I was like, you know what, you deserve a better life. And so, so they got to be the main bottom feeders in here. And I was a little unsure how they'd work out because I haven't really worked with that species before, but they've done an incredible job in here. They're one of the more active and notable fish if you hang out for longer than a few minutes and let them gain their confidence back after you approach the tank. And yeah, just really fascinating and unusual. I've really enjoyed having them around, and they've got a lot of character. After the initial grouping of fish, like I said, the green neons weren't really coming out all that much, and so I was trying to find a way to give them a bit more confidence and make them more notable within this tank, because they really are beautiful, and there's a whole bunch of them in there, but you just never really got to appreciate them. I was trying to come up with something that wasn't just like a rummy nose tetra or like the classic sort of stuff, just to keep it a little bit more unusual, I guess. Eventually settled on the lemon tetras, and the lemon tetras I think are super cool, super underappreciated. They oftentimes are really pale when they show up in the shop, and they can stay that way for like a month, but you give them time to come into their own. They get these beautiful red eyes, the males get like black tips on the fins. They're really, really fun fish. All of those kind of like oblique-bodied tetras, they seem to be a bit more out and about, a little bit more robust and confident, the kind of slimmer-bodied tetras. So they definitely are not nearly as shy, and really as soon as they got in there, the green neons started coming out all the time. So that was a huge success. Another point where we kind of had to like pivot and adapt a little bit and really exercise patience in finally getting to like appreciate and enjoy the green neon tetras. Just like with all the other tanks in the store and like my tanks at home in general, try to do a 30% water change once a week and like scrape all the glass. That's kind of the foundation of the maintenance for any tank, really. For this one, that's been kind of a really cool part of the learning process with this one that I feel like has allowed me to build a little bit more expertise in working with some of these plants, is figuring out how to effectively maintain each grouping, each variety. like the different groupings of stem plants in here are oftentimes maintained really differently from one another to keep the tank looking presentable and looking nice all the time. So for example, plants like the Rotala macrandra green and the Ludwigia arcuata, those are ones that I'll just like mow down right to the substrate. Basically just leave, you know, some naked stems like 1.5 to 2 inches tall at the bottom. We have bright enough light and plentiful enough nutrients and CO2 in here that I know that those real fast growing plants are really easily going to create side shoots and create a dense mass growing once again in just a matter of a week or two. So yeah, those ones just get like trimmed like a hedge. Some of them I will go through and like every once in a while unearth the whole mass, trim it down, prune it up, and then replant some stems while also saving some of the stems that we can like propagate and sell in the shop here. That would be for like the Super Red Ludwigia and the Lindernia rotundifolia. Those are ones that I feel like every few months they kind of get a little bit leggy down low. Once they've gotten dense enough, they sort of start to block some of the light from the lower leaves, and it just ends up looking better and rebounding a little bit better if you actually trim and replant it as opposed to just cutting it down to the substrate. And then some of them I'll do like a little bit of combination of both, like the Rotala Blood Red in the back corner. I really like having that really consistent like bright red element in that back corner, but that's one that I would normally just, similar to the macrandra green and the Nita Ludwigia, like just chop it down to the substrate. So what I'll usually do with that one is mow it down and then grab like, I don't know, 5-10 stems and just plant them around individually, kind of in and amongst the bare stems that have been trimmed, so you still get some like bright leaf material in there that brings that color while you're waiting for the rest of the stems to branch and start growing again. A lot of times with aquascapes, you end up putting something together, and it's hard to resist the urge to like do something completely new and totally change it up. That for some reason has not really been an impulse for me with this tank in particular. Maybe it's just the fondness that I have for it, given that it was a collaborative effort between Steve and I. Maybe it actually looks better than I give it credit for as an artist. Internally, I don't want to tear it up. But yeah, I just feel like this one is dynamic enough that I'm just gonna let it keep going until it crashes, basically. Hopefully we can get another year or two out of this one. I'm sure it'll take slightly different forms through that time. I might kind of get funky with how we trim it, or try and change the dynamic that way. But I think this one will probably stay relatively consistent going forward. It's just been so much fun to work with, and I feel like there's so much more potential left in here. These angels have more growing to do. It'd be amazing if we could get them to breed and get that super red koi line back in circulation in the hobby. A lot of these fish are still pretty young. The gar are very small, and it'd be fun to let them grow up into adults. So I think there's still a lot to be gained from working with and learning from and observing this aquarium. I think the advice that I would give is kind of a contradiction in and of itself, but it would be like plan, but don't plan. This one is one that I put a lot of thought into first setting it up, and the scaping process and the planting process, that was like days of work. It wasn't just like a couple hours, and I think that's really important, is putting a lot of thought into what you're gonna do with the tank, when you're first setting it up, how you want it to look, giving yourself a chance to step back and get some distance from it, and see if you still agree with the decisions that you were making when you're kind of in the thick of it. But yeah, and then like once you've got your scape down, I think being really deliberate about what sort of plants you choose for the areas that you want to grow them in. A lot of times you sort of get locked into, I want to use this plant in particular, and you'll try and like wedge it into a spot that it may not be optimal for, even though probably do better somewhere else or be better substituted for another plant, like the macrandra that I ended up having to pull out of here. So I think, yeah, just having a really good focus on what are the growth conditions going to be like in different areas of the tanks, and what is going to grow effectively in those spots. But then at the same time, like I said, not planning and being open to change, you know, not being too attached or set on one thing in particular, and being ready to respond to what the tank is giving you to get the best out of it. You know, like this one, the hairgrass started to really struggle. We started getting beard algae in here. That was after it went through a phase of looking really, really beautiful. That was really troubling at the time. I was like, oh no, this is it. It was only, you know, it was only viable for a limited time. Now it's got to go. But ended up just, you know, making some changes, sitting down, observing what's going on in the aquarium. Where can we make tweaks to potentially eliminate these issues? And, you know, in that case, trimmed back a lot of the pennywort to allow more light down on the hairgrass, pumped up the CO2 a little bit, and added some pandagara, and that got rid of the beard algae. So yeah, just staying open to change, not panicking when things start to go wrong. Yeah, I think that's probably the best that you can do. You know, I think the future is probably just lush plants and hopefully angelfish babies. That's what I'm hoping the future holds for this tank. But yeah, other than that, hopefully just consistency and some healthy life for these fish in here, because they definitely deserve it.